So for today's player profile, we're going to be discussing Jonathan Kuminga, an emerging star, young, budding player at 21 years old. He had an amazing season last year, all things considered. Didn't operate under the greatest of circumstances, obviously with the inconsistent role and playing time he was given, but managed to have a major impact on this team. And entering year 4, I think a lot of the fan base is very excited to see what he has in store. So last season, Jonathan Kuminga, 74 games played in 26 minutes per game, averaging 16 points, 52.9% from the field, 32% from three, 4.8 rebounds, 2.2 assists, and 0.7 steals. Jonathan Kuminga, obviously, last year had a very fluctuating role. Earlier in the season, he was out of the rotation, didn't really get much playing time, didn't have so much of a defined role. And you could see as the season progressed, once we specifically in that Portland game plugged him in, he immediately found his niche within the offense and overall his impact on the team, which was providing rim pressure, adding an element of scoring at the basket and an extra shot creator on the court, as he showed the areas that he grew in, specifically in the mid-range, getting to the basket, attacking mismatches, which we'll all get into one by one, but those are just a few. He was also very efficient, all things considered. He played next to Steph and Clay, who are elite spacers, and we're going to discuss the impact of that this season and what that looks like. But he benefited off of the ball movement, player movement style, and he also emerged as one of the best transition players in all of basketball. So that's another area that he really, honed in on. The 32% three-point percentage is something that we got to discuss further, but for his career, he's around 34%. I think that's something that we need to see him grow with. Last year, he showed the ability to knock them down at a very efficient clip in the corners, specifically over 40% from that distance. But above the break, he struggled mightily, and that's an area he's definitely going to have to, address. The rebounding is something that Steve has been asking JK to focus on for years. Last season, I thought he had a pretty successful overall rebounding effort, but I still think there's levels he can reach given his athletic tools, his size, frame. So that's an area that he can grow still in. And his playmaking, 2.2 assists is not a lot, but he did show really good flashes of being able to find players when he sees help and when he gets crowds and attention, double teams. His patience improved and his ability to read the floor was definitely something that advanced throughout the season. So that's something that we'll also continue to see him grow in. Now, beginning with his greatest, first and foremost strength, he is an elite finisher in the paint. His speed, body control, and explosiveness all contribute to his presence, his pressure, and his impact, his dominance at the basket. He's a lethal scorer on the fast break, effective at filling lanes and attacking the basket, getting to the rim, using his strength and his relentlessness. The relentlessness is such a key aspect because that's a mentality, that's a mindset, and the defense eventually wears down when you continuously put pressure on them. He averaged 18 points in the paint per 100 possessions last year. That's more than Franz Wagner, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Julius Randle, who are three of the best power forwards in the NBA, and three players who also score in the paint quite effectively. So he proved to be a more effective and more productive paint scorer than those players at his comparative position. And those are some of his peers. I mean, Jaren Jackson, Julius Randle, these are all-star caliber players. And he also finished 74% of his attempts at the rim, which is 88th percentile. He is elite. That means 12% of players at his position were better at finishing at the basket. He is essentially one of the 15 best finishers at the rim in the NBA. And that applies, like I said, to the fast break, in half-court situations, as a shot creator, attacking mismatches, and so on. He also increased his catch-and-go possessions. Catch-and-go meaning the stampede. So ready to catch the ball and immediately fly towards the basket, not wasting a movement, not wasting motion, getting to the rim with ease, beating his defender with his first step, and using his strength and agility to weave through the defense. That's another area of his game that I noticed off the ball that he incorporated in order to facilitate more pressure at the basket. Top foul drawer among rotation players. JK's foul drawing ability was something that really popped last year. Traditionally, given his lower volume and his smaller role, he hadn't really been as much of a free throw shooter from a volume standpoint in terms of attempts in years past. But last season, he really excelled at getting to the line and converting at a respectable clip. So the foul drawing is an element that we really haven't had over the years. We haven't really seen players on this roster put pressure on the rim at that level historically on this team. So he gives us a unique element and a unique look that is something that is more modern. It's more, it kind of throws a little bit of uh, the defense off a loop because they now have to focus on Steph moving off the ball, but also JK applying a lot of pressure at the basket. So it gives us more versatility offensively because it doesn't make us so 3-point reliant and 3-point dependent. It gives us a high quality, high level option at the basket in the paint. And then, like I said, he plays off of Steph Curry's gravity, spacing, and Draymond's passing. So what Steph does off the ball in terms of, his movement, his relocation, his, gravity, the attention that he draws from the defense, he's able to play off of that and take advantage of those advantages that Steph creates in terms of open lanes, attacking in space, and then also leverage Draymond's passing ability by cutting off the ball, diving, flashing to open space. Draymond's able to find him for quick cuts, getting to the basket and filling in the gaps where he can off the ball. So he can complement the core. That's one thing that he struggled with the first two seasons, JK in particular, was being a complementary piece with the core. I think one thing that he found last season that was very underrated was he was able to fill in the gaps next to Steph and Draymond in a way that didn't take away from what they do in their skill set. So that's incredibly important because he could then play within the offense, within the flow of our style and of our approach, rather than taking away from it and essentially uh, playing from a possession to possession basis based on his strengths and his skill set. Playing off of Steph and within the playmaking hub that is Draymond is a really good complement to what they do best as well. Now, I mentioned earlier, he improved as a shot creator. This is probably the most notable advancement in his game, the shot creation step. Manipulating defenders with his dribble. His handle has improved over the past few years. It's become more diversified. It's become more deadly, especially at the wing position, right? He's not a point guard or a shooting guard who has a tight handle that can break defenders off the bounce consistently, but he is a very solid ball handler at the forward position. And one thing that he learned to add was move combinations, maintaining balance with good footwork. I noticed that JK last season, once he got both feet planted within that 12-foot range, he understood how to take those one dribble pull-ups or those hesitation moves, the drop steps, the drag steps, the pump fakes. All of those added up to create a very elusive, unpredictable, and skillful finisher at the basket and also mid-range threat because what he was able to do last season was get to spots, kill spots. And similar to like how a Pascal Siakam scores, where he has the spin move, he has his footwork, that little turnaround, the ability to get to that elbow, that nail, get to the restricted area with the floater, using his touch and his skill to execute, but also understanding how to leverage his handle, his size, and his footwork to get there. That is essential. And JK, I believe, studied a lot of his peers, a lot of the comparative forwards at his position to get to that point. The Siakams of the world, those types of players that are more shifty, a little bit more rangy and mobile, agile, but are able to use their skill set to then get to spots and be effective from that range. Now, another aspect of his game, and this is very, very key, he was able to physically overwhelm defenders with his athletic tools. Remember, Jonathan Kuminga is legit 6'7", 6'8", 240 pounds. He's added some muscle over the years, so now he's, a solid 235, 240. He can bully ball mismatches. He can attack switches against smaller matchups, against players who are too slow, whether it's a big on the perimeter that switches out, or too weak, whether it's a smaller wing or a point guard, shooting guard matchup. So, for example, we saw last season Jamal Murray got into foul trouble. JK played him off the court against Denver because the Nuggets ended up switching Murray onto JK for a few possessions, and JK just put him at the basket. And he had to foul him. He didn't have a choice. Couldn't stop JK physically, and he was overwhelmed, and was played off the court. So this is something that JK can do very well. He's shown not only flashes, but a consistent ability to expose and exploit smaller, weaker defenders, and even slower defenders, bigs that get out on the perimeter. For example, even as elite of a defender as Anthony Davis is, JK showed the ability to attack Anthony Davis off the bounce and get by him, get past him to the basket. So he has shown the acuity and the intuitiveness to attack with speed, strength, and understanding how to use his frame, his body, to match that with skill. The turnarounds, putting guys in the basket, blowing past defenders, and finishing with either hand. Mostly the right, but working on different finishing combos as well. Only forwards in the league that can match his driving and mid-range efficiency. I want people to realize this. This is a statistical fact. The only forwards in the league that match Jonathan Kuminga's driving and mid-range efficiency are Kevin Durant and Kawhi Leonard. So last season, when you look at the combination of what he can do from a mid-range and driving standpoint, in terms of volume and efficiency, the only players who graded out, I believe, at a 35% clip and 40 in terms of usage, 43 in terms of efficiency in the mid-range, were Kevin Durant and Kawhi Leonard. So volume efficiency, we're talking about the elite players in the NBA. A lot of the class that you will see Jonathan Kuminga in, from a statistical standpoint, are some of the elite forwards and wings in the NBA. We're talking about guys like Kawhi, KD, Franz Wagner, Julius Randle, Jaren Jackson, DeMar DeRozan, Jimmy Butler, players of that sort. We're talking about fringe all-stars and high-level role players. 40% of his two-point makes were unassisted. Remember, last season he took a step as a shot creator. The first 2 seasons of his career, he was playing mostly off the ball. He was cutting, slashing, filling in space, playing in transition, those sorts of things. Last season, 40%, almost 50% of his two-point makes were unassisted. And so that tells you that how much of an improvement he really did make as a shot creator, how that was able to convert, and how he was able to deliver and excel. And given the lack of playing time, role, and opportunity that Steve provided him, the fact that he was so seamless and comfortable in taking a step in these areas as he was is incredibly impressive, because he didn't build rhythm, he didn't build reps or chemistry, and he just kind of slotted right in and immediately took off. And I think that's something that we have to look at when we really take a full overview and picture of what JK showed he was capable of. The fact that he was able to produce the way he did, as efficiently as he did, it speaks volumes to his talent. He's a very talented player, and he came into the league as one of the most talented prospects in his draft. Furthermore, physical attributes: 6'7", 225. I believe he's put on some weight since then, so around 230. This offseason, he really worked on his strength and conditioning. One thing that JK's worked on specifically is getting leaner, getting stronger, more mobile, and understanding how to leverage his agility within his frame. The combination of speed, strength, and agility at his size leads to the elite quick twitch athleticism. The quick twitch athleticism that gives him the burst, the first step quickness to beat bigger players down the court, to beat defenders off the dribble. And the strength, the elusiveness to get to spots against slower guards, to bully ball like a Julius Randle or like a Jimmy Butler, put guys in the basket, the 7-foot wingspan, the length to contest shots or to get shots off, the push shots, the floaters that he has incorporated to his offensive bag. He's added all types of unique shots to his repertoire, and specifically within that 6 to 12-foot range, getting to spots and really developing that skill set within that area, whether it's at the baseline, within the restricted area, or near the foul line. He's added all types of shot making tools and abilities to really be effective in those ranges. And then, like I mentioned earlier, his explosiveness, ducking in, cutting in, flashing into open space for quick dump offs. His ability to be mobile off the ball and be nimble on his feet, his short area agility is something that, is very, very apparent, and it pops off the screen because he can really exploit a lot of the league. He's a 99th percentile athlete. When you just combine all of the tools and skill sets and the attributes that he has, he really is one of the most elite athletes in the NBA. The culmination, the composite of what he can provide, and the vertical threat that he poses in the half court and in transition. So he not only poses a major vertical presence in the half court in terms of the short lobs, cutting from the baseline in advantage situations, or just that little tic-tac-toe play in the dunker spot, but also in transition, running the floor, filling in space, and using his speed and his verticality to stand out from the rest. His ability to guard multiple positions. That's been the case since he came to the NBA. He is switchable. He can guard 1 through 3 comfortably, and he's able to play power forward against certain matchups. Stronger, bigger power forwards like an Aaron Gordon, who's 6'9", 250, 255. Those players he has struggled against historically, and that's something that he's going to continue to have to work on. We'll talk more about that, but in general, he can guard 1 through 3 comfortably. We've seen him guard Kawhi, KD, Jason Tatum. These are some of the most premier wings, power forwards, small forwards in the league, and he has done an amazing job in terms of his matchup data, shutting down and essentially locking up some of the great forwards in the NBA. So the same class that he's in offensively, he's actually performed quite well against defensively, and he can switch. He can switch on to twos like Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, Derek White, for example, against Boston. He can switch on to players. He guarded Luka quite well in his second season. So kind of these bigger wings that play on the perimeter, he can hold up against quite well. The wings who are more bruisers, physical, rebounding presences in the paint, those are who he struggles with a lot. So that's something, again, he's going to have to kind of work on. But against Jason Tatum in particular, he did an amazing job last year defending him. And you go on a matchup-to-matchup basis, he definitely does a very good job for the most part. So the versatility is there. Using his length to crowd ball handlers, poke away dribbles, harass jump shooters. 7-foot wingspan, so he can use that to, leverage his foot speed, his agility in the short areas, kind of applying pressure to the ball, and holding his own against tough assignments. One thing that JK is very capable of is, against some of the tougher lead, players, offensive options in the NBA, he's actually done a very good job against. If you look against all-stars, against high-level scoring options, he's actually done a very good job. And specifically against some of the better perimeter players, he's done quite well too. Now, the first step, the shifty offensive players like the Devin Bookers, the Ja Morants, those players he's still working and striving to guard effectively. I think one thing with JK that we'll touch on is his defensive positioning and his understanding of angles and distance is something that needs a little bit of work. So sometimes he's prone to getting beat and getting kind of beat off the dribble and exploited from that standpoint. But against certain matchups, the less shifty guards or the less shifty wings, guys who are more perimeter oriented, where he can get to the release point, use his length, use his presence, and just his athletic tools to get to those, peak points, and just bother those shots. He's done a very good job against, especially against some of the premier wings in the NBA, as I mentioned. So I expect that to continue, and I believe he's has the potential to be a wing stopper. And that's the trajectory that I'm seeing. Setting more picks both on and off the ball. This is one of the great advancements of JK's game in terms of filling in and incorporating in the Steve Kerr offense, really fitting right into the system, right? Setting picks, setting screens on and off the ball, whether it's the inverted pick and roll, using Steph's gravity to create misdirection, confusion for the defense, and, either drive to the basket for a drive and kick or to score. And these give JK options to read the defense effectively, put him in read and react positions to understand the flow of the offense, and then also gives him easy opportunities, provides him with effective quality looks to get to the basket and score. His driving gravity is something that's very apparent. When JK puts the ball on the floor and attacks, he creates havoc. Defenses collapse, and there's times where there's 2, 3 defenders on him in the paint. These create openings for shooters, other cutters, and one thing that I've seen from JK in particular over the years is his ability to actually find cutters really well. He's actually done a good job of dropping off passes to bigs like Looney or Trace, or finding cutters like Wiggins off the ball to the rim. That's an underrated part of his game that he's shown flashes of and developed, and he'll continue to as he gets more experience and reps in those positions. But what Steve has done is actually quite innovative, using the motion offense principles to get us in the flow, but also playing to JK's strengths as a downhill threat, someone that can collapse the defense, but also score with ease. I think that's something that, he's applied with Draymond from a playmaking standpoint, and now we're seeing it with JK from an offensive and scoring standpoint. Now, some weaknesses. Now, this is important to touch on because as great of a player as JK has become in the limited time that he's been given, there are some things he has to address. First is inconsistent awareness and effort on defense. There's times where he's overhelping or ball watching too often. That's an area that he has addressed somewhat, but he still needs to work on. So really paying attention to the play, right? Understanding that, what is in front of you, who are you guarding, what is the scouting report, what are the tendencies you have to look at, and sometimes he overhelps. He cheats off of shooters, cheats off of players that he really shouldn't. Ball watching, he kind of gets lost in the secondary action, or the primary action, and then the secondary action actually ends up beating him. So ball watching is definitely a weakness because those secondary actions lead to backdoor cuts. They lead to weak side pin downs, and then he kind of loses separation, gets lost, and then it leads to disadvantages where guys are freeing up for quality looks. So one thing JK needs to focus on is just staying connected, staying aware, and really focusing on what the play is and how to rotate. Draymond also can do a good job of directing JK as well. As I mentioned in the previous player profile, Draymond can communicate, put guys in the right position, but it's also incumbent on JK to be locked in. He doesn't also have a high motor for off-ball rotations. I think last season, I will say he took a step in that area. So even though I don't think his motor, in terms of rotating off the ball is high, I still think it's improved, and I would consider it average. Like, he does a good job of closing out on shooters, weak side, understanding how to tag the roller, dig, and then fly out for a contest. I think that's something he's worked on and improved on over the past couple of years, and so we'll see him continue to do that. But I think he's made a more conscious effort with this in particular. Now the more pressing matter: biting on pump fakes, closing out too hard, and leaving his feet too much. This is something he absolutely has to clean up. For example, when he was guarding DeMar DeRozan last year, and DeRozan was getting to his spots, leveraging his tutelage and his know-how, his craftiness, his his veteran understanding of how to exploit the youth of JK in terms of getting him off his feet, pump faking, and creating this sense of uh, confusion because the footwork, getting to his spots. JK at times overthinks things defensively. Understanding positioning, matchups, and angles are things that he needs to work on. And when I say angles, playing too close to to an offensive player, giving up the blow by, giving up the drive, playing way too far out, looking to contest, biting on the pump fake, and then fouling them. So JK, I think the biggest thing needs to improve his sense of distance. Because if he can figure that out the way Draymond has, obviously Draymond is an exception to the rule, but even like a Wiggins, right? I think there's a world where JK can get to that level of understanding how to contest, get to that release point, bother shots, but also not give up the blow by, because that is the tug of war that he is struggling with, right? He's struggling with that tug of war, to kind of balance the contest with the blow bys, and that's something that we're gonna have to continue to see him to work on. So staying disciplined, right? Fundamentally sound. Steve has emphasized that over the years, and we're going to need him to continue that growth for us to close with him on a game-to-game basis, right? If you're leaving your feet, if you're getting beat by your man, if you're undisciplined and you're foul prone, um, you know, resulting in breakdowns in big moments, you're not reliable to close games. So we need JK to improve in those areas. Now, there are some concerns about floor spacing. We've had these concerns for a few years now. He needs to increase his 3-point volume. Last couple of years, or the last 3 years for that matter, he's only attempted 2 threes a game. So he's only taking a couple threes a game, which frankly is not enough to get the defense to respect you. In order for the defense to respect JK more as an outside shooter, as a threat on the perimeter, he needs to take more threes. The more threes he takes, the more open he will probably be, resulting in more open shots, resulting in the defense having to respect him more, and then ultimately causing more breakdowns, allowing him to attack closeouts and exploit that. But that is a far ways away. That is a long step. Look at Andrew Wiggins' trajectory, for example. Defenses have left Andrew Wiggins open for years. Now, when they begin to close out, he can attack, drive and kick, or get to the rim. That evolution, that area of his game has improved because he's become a more respectable and reliable three-point shooter. So what JK needs to work on is taking more threes, making more threes, and that'll open up the rest of his game. Then he can get into his 1-dribble pull-ups, his 2-dribble pull-ups, baseline shots, driving kicks, getting to the basket on the baseline, dunking over defenders, putting pressure on the rim, drawing fouls. All of these areas that he can open up are a result of his shooting or lack thereof. So it opens up an entire new dimension, an area of his game, if he can be a respected three-point shooter and space the floor. And like I said, his ceiling as an offensive weapon is capped. If he can't attack closeouts, if that area of his game is limited or more limited than it should, then he can't really explore the full toolkit that he has, the full range of ability that he has. So ultimately, if we want JK to realize the full potential of his offensive game, then what we need him to do is attack closeouts and get to the basket, get to the mid-range, the 1-dribble pull-ups. But in order for him to do that, the defense has to respect him from the three-point line. It also relegates him to a lot of corner and dunker spot placements. So essentially, JK becomes more predictable. By not being a reliable three-point shooter, by not being respected by defenses, you essentially become more predictable because they can key in on what your what your strengths are, what your strong suits at. So, for example, him playing in the dunker spot, baseline cuts, 45 cuts, flashing into open space, and corner threes, mid-range. All of these things make JK more predictable because it shrinks the floor for the defense to really hone in on his actual capabilities. So shooting the three ball opens up his entire game, and he will go from good to great if he's able to consistently knock down his 3-point shots. So good to great. We're talking about fringe all-star potentially. And then lastly, he needs to improve his rebounding ability. Rebounding has been an issue for years. I think last season he was solid. I don't think he was great, but he needs to improve it still, especially if he's going to be playing the four. He needs to be more reliable and more consistent as a rebounder. Focus on boxing out, putting himself on a man, putting a body on man and crashing the boards, right? Going in to the fray amongst the trees and physical, right? Just putting a body in the paint and living with that physicality, that matters. That matters. And having that presence is of the utmost importance, because if he's able to rebound and defend effectively at the four, that means he's a better closing option. He's a more reliable closing option. So the rebounding is less so for the first 42 minutes. It's more so for the last six. The last 6 minutes of the game, if he can be an Aaron Gordon type of rebounder, where Aaron Gordon, and obviously, that's a high bar to set. That's a high standard. But even if he's 80% of that, Aaron Gordon's a guy that can give you offensive rebounds in the clutch, securing defensive rebounds to close defensive possessions when it matters most. That's what we need from JK. We cannot afford to give up second chance opportunities, second chance points, and offensive rebounds don't hurt either. Furthermore, there's times where he loses his dribble in traffic. He had the 19th highest turnover rate in the NBA on drives. That is very high. He's less active in reading the help and prone to lazy turnovers at times. Sometimes he just drives into a crowd without a plan, or kind of a little bit out of control, out of sync. And what it results in is, the refs aren't going to bail him out. So he loses the ball. Defenses have the advantage, and he needs to sometimes be more definitive and more uh, he needs to attack with more of a plan. He can't just drive without a plan, and he needs to leverage his athleticism to understand how he's going to break down the defense. So, for example, if he's driving into a crowd and he's thinking, I'm going to get to the basket, but there's two defenders rotating, he needs to realize that with the rotation, he can find open shooters, find open cutters. And that's an area of his game he's developed over time. He has developed that over time, but the activity and reading help is something that he's had to develop, because the first 2 years of his career, especially his rookie season, he found himself driving into crowds and not effectively breaking the defense down with intent to score at all times, and intent to make his teammates better. I think now he can be more intentional with that, because he has a superpower. His superpower is being one of the best finishers, one of the best presences at the basket in all of basketball. So because he can put pressure on the rim at such an elite level, he now has to think about how he's going to leverage that to be more effective, pick his spots, be more intentional, and free up his teammates. And the turnover rate that he had, like I said, is very high. So that needs to be something he cleans up. We cannot afford for him to, multiple times a game have live ball turnovers resulting in fast break opportunities for the opposing team. It's more valuable for him to take his time, take, each possession, kind of run the shot clock down, whether it's inverted pick and roll, whether it is just a ball screen, whatever it might be. Having JK be more patient is absolutely critical, because losing the ball in traffic for live ball turnovers is going to cost you. Having a high turnover rate is going to cost you. Not reading help defense is going to cost you against the better defenses, right? So patience is key. Now, his poor passing vision, I think he's improved in this, but I still think it needs work. One thing that he specifically struggles with, I think his passing vision is actually passable when he gets to the paint. The issue is right before he gets to the paint. Because there's times where the defense will cut off his drives and they will prevent him from getting 2 feet into the paint. And when they do that, he gets stuck. And like I mentioned earlier, he turns the ball over. So the drive and kick ability that's there, he doesn't see it. The cutters that are there, he doesn't see it. The DHO opportunities, he doesn't see it. So finding ways to see the defense rotate, or understand how the defense will rotate before it does, that is absolutely essential. And the only way JK can improve on that, there's two ways. It's film study It's studying film and how defenses, the patterns that they run defensively, they rotate, and then also himself being patient with reps, like taking his time, learning from his mistakes, not repeating the same mistake twice, and really understanding the patterns and the spacing concepts that we have, right? Open shooters like Wiggins, Steph, Pods, Melton, these guys, right? And understanding the cutters like Wiggins, guys that flash trace. That's what we got to see. So experience is absolutely important, and I do think he worked on this offseason. I think he worked on his pass vision. Now again, he is the bottom of the league in pass rate at 26% and assist rate at 2.8%. So those are just some numbers to back up his lack of passing. Only averages 2.2 assists. I think that's an area he needs to take a step in. He needs to be a better passer and playmaker, and he can. There's a lot of room for it, and there's a lot of players that have done that. I would look at Anthony Edwards and I would look at Jason Tatum as models for Kuminga to improve his playmaking at the wing position, because those guys in particular at the wing spot, and now you can argue Anthony Edwards is more of a guard, 6'4", 6'5", but Tatum, for example, at 6'9", 6'10", he's someone that learned how to drive and kick effectively, someone that understood how to collapse the defense effectively. And so I think JK can learn from some of his peers and counterparts. And that's just an area that I think, every forward needs to improve on. KD is a solid playmaker. He's a good playmaker. Is he elite? No. But if JK can improve from a playmaking standpoint and become elite potentially, I think that's an absolute game changer. Now, as far as his expectations go, we should look at right here. Or actually, let's finish up his weaknesses. So, like I mentioned, right, his weaknesses, the playmaking is very, very important. It's very, very crucial. And Bubba, do you think in terms of playmaking, do you see JK improving in that area this season in particular? Because I think that's really, really
Yeah,
important.
no. That's something. The playmaking has to get there, right? So, and I always like to use this example because look, Anthony Edwards, great young player, superstar, future of the league, right? What happened in the playoffs? When what happens in the playoffs is these teams, and we did this to the Celtics as well. In 2022, we did the same thing to the Celtics. When you are a great like player that can drive and collapse the defense and finish, if that's what you most of your scoring comes from, when you get to the higher levels of the playoffs and as you become higher and higher on people's scouting list, they try to take away they try to see if they taking can take away your playmaking, right? So they collapse on you. That's what we did in 2022. We forced them to the left hand, collapsed, forced them to make the play. They wasn't able to do that, right? They've gotten better over time. And you saw this year they've gotten better at that, right? Anthony Edwards, trap, forced him to make some reads. He struggled to make certain reads, right? Same thing with JK. When you're a dynamic athlete like that and you can drive and collapse a defense, eventually they will hard collapse on you and see if you can make those reads, right? And that's where JK, it's crucial for him to make those reads if we want to succeed this year. Because in the playoffs, that's what they're gonna do. They're gonna collapse hard on you, stay home on shooters like Steph, and force you to make reads. And last year we saw at times when teams started to take away JK's scoring and force him to play make, he wasn't able to do it, right? He was struggling to make certain reads. He would turn over the ball. When they would collapse on him and he would drive into a crowd, they would find ways to poke the ball, right? So that is crucial for him to become that next player and for him to be the guy we need him to be this year. Playmaking is very crucial. You have to be able to make those right reads when the defense collapses on you. Because if you can't, you become very one dimensional. And in the playoffs, that will hurt us and that will hurt you as well. Because then they realize, yo, this guy can't make a play at all. Let's hard collapse and it'll be an easy turnover, stay home on the shooters, right? But when you can make the pass, then they can't hard collapse on you, right? If they hard collapse on you, if you're capable to making those reads, that's an open kick out, basic basketball, basic read, kick, kick, kick three, right? Or a easy pass to the dunker spot, right? So that's very crucial for JK. Very crucial for him to become what we need him to be. The scoring is good and all, being able to get your own shot, having your own hezzies, that's nice and all. but can you make those reads? And that's gonna not. I don't think that matters much in the regular season. I think you can get away with it, but in the playoffs, if you can't make those reads, that's when you become exposable, and that's when people will expose you, and that's when having him on the court might hurt us. You know what I mean, Dre?
No, that's a great point. So
Yeah.
let's really double click on that. So, like I
And
mentioned,
that's why
right?
I compare him to Gian. That's why I think he has to watch Giannis and Zion. That's what makes those guys so great.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Mm-hmm.
and JK is on the level of athleticism like those guys. He is that level of athlete, right? So that's what he has to do. Watch film on those guys. What makes Zion so fucking great is not that he's a fucking dynamic athlete and he can throw it down on you. He can also kick it out. He's an elite passer. He's a point forward, right? So that's why you don't see people clap hard on him as much, because when they do, Pelicans have surrounded him with shooters. He can make that read. And remember, against us in that April game, when we were collapsing on Zion, Zion was making those reads. He was passing out to his shooters, and they were playing, kick basketball and getting threes on us. So that's what JK has to do. Watch guys like Giannis and Zion when they drive, and watch how they make those reads, right? That's the next level you have to take your game at if you want to contribute in a playoff level setting, which we will need him to do this year.
No, that's amazing points. Like, so that's why I said he needs to look to study some of his peers, right? So you mentioned
Exactly. And
Zion,
study Jason Tatum as
Giannis,
well. Tatum is a good guy to look at as well, because you remember in
Tatum, right?
2022, that's one of the reasons how we beat those guys. Forced them to their weak hand, crowded them, and they weren't able to make that read, right? They were struggling to make those reads, and that was easy turnovers, and
Would you
we were
would
just
you
getting out in
agree?
transition.
Would you agree that playmaking might be the biggest weakness in his game?
Right now, yes, yes. I don't think
Okay,
his
and
defense is
I would
as bad
agree
as we make it out to be.
because I think if you look at every other area, defense, rebounding, scoring, shooting, I think I would argue playmaking is probably the weakest.
Playmaking is gonna hurt the most, because once people realize you can't make reads, that's when they hard collapse on you. And when they hard collapse on you and you're not able to make those reads, you become practically useless. Wouldn't you agree? They're hard collapsing, they're getting easy turnovers from you. What can you contribute offensively? You're not doing much then, right? And that's when Steve will be forced to take him out. So it is very crucial for his playmaking to take a step. Because the defenses now understand, yo, you're a really dynamic athlete and a downhill player. We can just collapse on you. And once they find out you can't make those reads, that's what they're gonna do, right? And you saw towards the end of last year, teams started to do that a bit, and he was struggling to make some passes. So
Yeah, I see
that's
some people in the
that's the
chat
thing.
said that they think that shooting or off ball. I think off ball defense
Oh,
is
wait,
up there.
here's the thing with JK shooting. I don't think JK ever has to be like an elite 3-point shooter. Because here's the thing with Kaminga, right? Kaminga is such a dynamic athlete that what he has already mastered, and that's very impressive, is look, when people give him space, you saw it last year. He wasn't a great shooter, but he was still getting to the rim. How? People gap him, right? And that's a mistake they do. Yeah, at times it is effective. They gap him and then they can, hold him. But against most defenders in the league, no one can keep up with him. When they gap him, he uses a crab dribble and he uses that space as a launching pad and gets into the air, right? And launches and tries to finish around the rim, right? And he can do that against most players. That's why I don't think he ever has to be an elite shooter. He just has to be like 5 attempts, 6 attempts on like 35 from the field. Keep it respectable to where they're not fully sagging off and collapsing on you. But I don't think he needs to be like 40% or 30% like Wiggins,
And
because
and
he's
and
such a
here's the other thing
dynamic
too, right?
athlete
The
that it doesn't
shooting,
even fucking matter. Like he'll just
the
use
reason
that
I can't
space.
say the reason I can't say the shooting is the weakest part is because he's actually one of the better corner 3-point shooters in the
That as
league.
well, yeah. The corner is the sweet spot. But like, I'm never gonna be worried about the shooting because of his athleticism and because he's already
Hmm.
understand the idea of space. He knows this guy's sagging off of me. Let me use one dribble and then just pounce. He's such an uber athlete that he can just use that as a launching pad, right?
Right.
So I don't think shooting will ever be that much of an issue like his defense and his playmaking is. I think the
But
playmaking is a huge problem.
the two areas that he needs to improve on the most, off-ball defense and
Hmm.
playmaking. And the
Yeah, the
thing
off-ball
that
defense
that
can
is
be bad.
probably what will cost him if he doesn't close games. It'll be because of those two reasons. Because the defense is going to take away his scoring. We know that, like you said,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah. So
So
once exactly. So and that's why I really need that playmaking leap because I think he'll get away with it in the regular season. He'll dominate, do his thing. We'll be hyped. But then in the playoffs, they're gonna see, "I man, this guy's a legit scorer. Let's trap him. Let's collapse on him. Can he make those reads? And if he struggles, you're done." I don't think you can beat anyone then because they've taken away one of our best scorers. You know what I mean? And they're going to be getting turnovers off of that. That's what a lot of teams were doing last year. So playmaking is very important, man.
yeah, and like you look at some of the elite wings in the NBA, Kawhi, PG, KD, Tatum. These guys are average or above average playmakers. Right now,
Yup.
JK's below average, right?
Yeah, I was
So just
thinking
even
so.
getting to that average point, because he'll be more of a secondary creator for us in general. So I don't think he needs to be like a primary creator level playmaker, but he does need to improve in this area because that is what I think will end up being his Achilles heel as a young player.
Yup. Yup.
Eventually, he'll improve enough to where it won't be an issue, I believe. But for now, as a young player, because every young player comes into
Right.
the league, they
Yup.
can score, they can defend a little bit, they can, do some of this, some of that. But one
And
thing they really struggled with that I've seen with the Devin Bookers, with the Anthony Edwards, with the even the Jason Tatums, they struggled
Jalen
making those
Brown,
moments.
we saw it in the finals, right? That's one of the reasons why the Warriors managed to win that series. Draymond has talked about this. Iggy talked about this, right? And honestly, he needs to pick it up really fast because what happens is sometimes these players, they're not, that playmaking isn't emphasized enough when they're young that they don't care about it. And as they grow up, they don't care because they're just great scorers, right? Like it took Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown a while to learn it, right? They were like still, what year were they when we played them? Like five or six, 6 and 7, right? That's a while in the league, right? And they still didn't figure out that playmaking, and it cost them. And eventually they did learn, but that's my fear with Kaminga. He's such a great scorer that if you don't put it in his head right now, it might be too late. It's best to learn right now and start like emphasizing it. Doesn't mean you have to be like the best playmaker in the league at your position. No.
Right.
But start to make those reads, start to understand, hey, I can't always score. I have to understand they're gonna collapse on me. Let me take advantage and find some, other guy. You have to drill that right away. If you don't drill it right away, it'll take a while and it might not translate ever, right? Because there's some players that never learn that skill then, and that makes them super one dimensional. So we
And
have to start
and
drilling
I'm
it.
gonna point out, right? It's also the more advanced reads too, because I do think he's capable of
Right,
making.
basic reads he can, but the advanced reads when they like hard collapse, that's when you have to make quick decisions on the fly. That's where he struggles. The quick decisions, right? On the
Yeah,
fly, understanding they're
the
about to
advanced
collapse on me.
reads. When I say
Right.
the advanced reads, I'm referring to when he's driving to the paint, right? Finding
Yeah.
the corner man, the skip pass,
Mm-hmm.
understanding how to, um, you know, effectively collapse a rotating defense, and then find open shooters or open cutters more often. I think JK is at his best right now as a playmaker when the game is slowing down, when he's patient. But sometimes you can't be patient. The defense is going to speed you up. They're going to, pressure you. They're going to pressure the ball. They're going to send multiple defenders and bodies your way. You have to make quick decisions and you have to be effective in those positions. So that is what I need to see from JK is advancing that
Yep.
over time.
And that's
And
one of the
and again,
reasons why Steve hasn't trusted him yet because that's the shit that matters in the playoffs. Being able to make quick decisions on the fly. And this is where young guys struggle with, right? And this is why Steve don't like to play young guys. And it's a fair thing to do because you have to be quick. And teams have scouted you, they have like multiple pages reports on you, and they know your strength and they'll take it away and target your weaknesses, right? So that's when it becomes vital. Quick reads. They're about to double me, let me pass it out. Or I hard drive, they're collapsing quick. Let me make that dump pass, right? So just on the fly, making reads, that's the next step for him. Because right now, he can make a lot of basic reads. I'm not saying he's like a negative playmaker. He can make basic reads, but it's those advanced, quick reads where he has to take a leap. Because we're going to need him, quite frankly. Like, he's got to be that second guy this year.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. But that's ultimately what I want to see from him. I think,
Yeah.
the off-ball awareness defensively is
That got to get
something
better,
that
too, bro. That
we
got to
have to
get
see
better as
that.
well.
We have to see that, but I think the playmaking may need more catching up with than even that because I feel like his closeouts and his ability to rotate has improved a little bit over time, and so has the playmaking. But um, the defense can do a far more effective job of exploiting a lack of playmaking
Right.
than
Yeah.
exploiting, weak side, rotation
Because
help. Like, I
at the
think
end of the day, the dude is still what 6'9", a fucking dynamic athlete. Like he can be a neutral on defense, right? Like at the end of the day, I feel like Warriors fans overrate his defense, and I in the past have done this as well. I'm a victim of that, but I've really dig down and started watching some JK clips. He's neutral, man. At the end of the day, he's fucking 6'8", a dynamic athlete. He'll be fine. It'll take time. He's still a young guy, right? It's the playmaking that people will really they will destroy you for that, right? And especially in the playoffs, because if we want to get to the playoffs and be competitive, that's the one thing JK has to understand. Start making quick reads on the fly. Start understanding that aspect of the game, right?
absolutely. So now moving on to expectations. I expect him next season to have a consistent role and minutes starting at power forward. He will be a secondary creator for us. That'll be his primary role. Scoring or creating an advantage for his teammates, attacking closeouts with force and putting pressure on the rim. So, again, when I say creating an advantage, we're talking about driving gravity. We're talking about the vertical spacing, the presence that he is as a rim pressure, as providing, as a rim threat, right? And collapsing the defense and then scoring the ball, right? We know he can be a high volume scorer and very efficient at that. And the next step of his game is attacking closeouts, putting pressure on the basket. And for that to happen, he has to improve as a play finisher, which includes him improving as a 3-point shooter, ball screens, being a roll man. All of these areas he needs to address to then open up his individual creation, whether it's scoring or making his teammates' jobs easier by creating space for them. So the culmination of his offensive step uh, after the offseason he's had, right? Working on his handle, tightening that up, working on his 3-point shot relentlessly every single day, getting work in the gym, the corner three, the above the break three, off the dribble, all types of shots off the bounce, the art of the mid range, getting to certain spots on the floor, baseline, elbow, all of that in the post, working on footwork and angles, all of that is going to lead to JK taking a step next season, offensively that is. And like I said, right, he will be tasked with being our secondary creator. So Steph Curry is the best shot creator on this team, and JK is definitively the second. We saw it last season. He gave us 16 points a game, and he showed the ability on volume and efficiency to be effective. So I really think, if he improves his 3-point shooting, that'll not only improve his overall scoring, but it'll also improve certain areas of his playmaking or of his off the dribble game, getting to spots on the floor, attacking closeouts, one dribble pull ups, getting to the rim. All of that, all of those abilities will emerge by adding some other skills. And then as a ball screener, right, he can run inverted pick and roll. He can run slip cuts, flares, diving to the rim, right? Collapsing the defense, wreaking havoc, being a presence and providing pressure at the basket, that will be a game changer if especially he can play make out of those positions too. Now, I also assume next season that he'll take a step defensively to some degree. He said he worked on defensive reads this offseason, that he studied a lot of film. I expect his defensive versatility to remain and to be a major impact. He'll be a wing stopper. His frame, explosion, and length. are some of the better on the team, outside of maybe Trace, Draymond, and that it's a handful of players you can maybe name that are even close. But I think J.K. You look at Wiggins for example, right? 6'7", the verticality and the length, right? Draymond wingspan of 7'3", 6'5". He's pretty mobile, strong, big. Trace 6'9", 6'10", 7'2" wingspan. The mobility that he has. So we have some players that are very, very athletic, but JK is easily the best, and he's probably one of our better wing stoppers. Outside of, maybe Wiggins and Kyle Anderson, JK is right in that mix. And we've seen him guard KD, Tatum, and of the like, and he's done a very good job. He's held up against them and actually had a positive results against them as well. Yeah, and 100%. We have to JK needs to play defense with his feet, not his hands. When he starts playing defense in an undisciplined, fundamentally unsound way, where he's biting on pump fakes and reaching in and, the wraparounds, that's when he starts to get caught. He needs to work on defense, sliding his feet, staying in front of his man, putting pressure on the ball, and contesting shots. And I think as a wing stopper, he'll continue that. Now, the point of attack, he'll find himself in those positions at times next year. Quick lateral movements to stay in front of his assignment, constant ball pressure. I think all of that we've seen over the past few years against certain matchups. Now, against the Devin Bookers, the John Morants, that might be a little bit more difficult for him to stay in front of. But I think, laterally, he's shown the ability to, move his feet, stay in front of his man, provide ball pressure, and really commit to that end of the court. Especially in year two, we saw it. And I think last season we did see a little bit of that too. So the more that JK is invested on the defensive end, especially when he's on the perimeter, the better. Because that'll lead to runouts, transition opportunities, and ultimately stops, which will, give us some, extra possessions to score. Also, as a help side defender and supplementary rim protector, I think JK can provide value in that area too. We remember last season, JK's help defense improved over time. He didn't come out quite as sharp and polished, but it took some reps and experience for him to get there. And once he did, he was really good. His help side defense improved, and ultimately, as a supplementary rim protector, he showed the ability to rotate and actually be a guy that can block shots, here and there. Not someone that's consistent at that. I wouldn't call him a rim deterrent or a rim protector in a vacuum, but I do consider him someone that can block a shot here and there, weak side and helping, especially on a rotation. So that is another area of his game I expect him to improve on, and continue to develop in, because he does have a good instinct for when to help and when to like leverage his athleticism to make an impact. Is there anything else that you guys think he might do next year in terms of his role? Good timing. Yes, his timing's very good as well. I think that just the totality of his athletic tools just to allow him to be all of these things: a play finisher, a creator off the bounce at his size, and the position that he plays, wing stopper, point of attack, and help side defender. I think all of that leans into that. Now, next year, this is my official player projection for Jonathan Kuminga. 31.3 minutes per game, 19.7 points, 6.2 rebounds, 2.8 assists, zero point 0.9 steals, zero point 0.6 blocks on 51.3 from the field, 35.8 from 3, and 77.4 at the line. I have him at a plus 174 plus minus. I think he's going to be a higher volume scorer, maybe slightly less efficient, but that's because his three-point attempts will go up. His overall volume is going to go up, but still above 50%. I have his three-point percentage around 36 to 37%. So that's what I'm predicting. And as far as rebounds go, I expect that to improve. I expect his assist to improve, his court vision, his understanding of how to collapse the defense and effectively break it down to make plays for others, leveraging his driving gravity and his rim pressure. And I think his mid-range game is going to take a step as well. His shot creation, getting to spots, getting to certain areas on the court, baseline, pull-ups, elbow, at the nail. All of these areas I think he's going to excel at, because that's an area of his game that he worked on in the offseason. So And they'll continue to put pressure on the rim, like I said, getting to the basket, attacking mismatches, exploiting weaker, slower defenders. I expect him to be more aggressive and more relentless in that area as well. And, defensively, picking up a half a block, picking up a steal. He's going to be active on that end. I think he takes a step overall, specifically off the ball, but even on the ball, I think he can improve too. So these are the things that I see from JK next year. 31 minutes per game is specifically because I think he will start and he will close. Last season, he showed the ability to do both, and I think he'll be improved next year, so he'll even be a better, more reliable option in those positions as well. And I think he'll be a massive positive, a plus 174. Last season, he was around a plus 125 or so, plus 126. I think he'll be a plus 170 this year. He's going to, dominate in his minutes, just like he did last year. I believe the Warriors were 11.9 points per possession better than the opponents when he was on the court. So his impact was very, very high. We were winning his minutes, and we were winning them big. And again, I expect his shooting to take a step, his ball handling to tighten up, his overall shot creation to improve, and for him to be more of a threat as a scorer, shot creator, and ultimately as an all-around player. Because that's what JK said he is. He said he's an all-around player, and that's what he wants to improve on the most. Improve on his total game, the whole package, and specifically as a rebounder, I think he'll take a decent step next season as well. I think he got stronger. He'll be more physical, understanding positioning and boxing out, how to put his body in front of his man and close defensive possessions consistently. All of these things to me will culminate a year 4 step that is comparable to Jordan Poole's year 3 step back in 2022. And I believe JK can be our second best scorer on the roster. At 21 years old, turning 22 this month in October, I expect him to, uh, obviously the offseason he's had has been very successful, take a major step. He might even be a fringe all-star. With enough games played and enough winning that takes place, if we can be a top 4 seed by all-star break, there's a chance that he's a fringe all-star, as said by Draymond Green, by the way. Draymond Green saying that a successful, strong season for Kuminga would be an all-star appearance, and I wouldn't rule that out. Is it likely? Maybe not. But is it impossible? Absolutely not. I think it's possible, and he can be a fringe all-star, which would still be a major accomplishment for a guy that has had so much inconsistent playing time, uh, you know, fluctuating role and opportunity over the years, and for him to come out on top, and for him to play the way he has, to show out, to be as consistent as he is, it's massively impressive, and it speaks to his work ethic and character to stay ready, to stay connected, to never give up, and to improve his game. Always improving and evolving. He needs to evolve. So he's already set a high bar for himself and a high baseline, and I think there's a ceiling that we haven't even imagined yet. As a two-way wing in the NBA, I think Jonathan Kuminga takes a massive step next year. This is the year, and especially in a contract year, in a contract season, I think he's going to take a major step because he needs to produce. He needs to be more efficient. He needs to take a step on that end uh, from a defensive standpoint because for him to earn the full max, which is what his camp wants, that's the only way he can pull it off. All right, so that is the Jonathan Kuminga player projection. That is what I have him at next year. And any thoughts or ideas in terms of this overall prediction? What do we think?
Incredible analysis.
Appreciate that, bro. Appreciate y'all, man. GSW Ball Report, XQCK, stay cozy. Appreciate you guys. The more
Good
important thing for
analysis, Dre.
Kuminga,
Good analysis. But I
thank you.
wanted to ask, how many attempts do you think he'll take from three? How many threes is he pulling?
I have him around
Five?
3.8,
3.8? Okay, okay. I hope he can take
3.7,
five.
3.8.
Yeah. I think he has to take five. I know I said I'll never worry about his shooting, but he has to at least take five and hit 35. That will really help our spacing and just like help his game as well. But yeah,
Dre, what was his
3.8 is still solid.
Dre, what was
What's
his
up, Pro?
plus minus? What was his plus minus last year?
I have
Shout out
no
to
clue.
Young Tio, man. Appreciate you, bro. Enjoyed the breakdown. Most improved All-Star season next year on the way. Facts. Facts. I'm telling you guys, and we can really get into the nitty-gritty of it because I'm telling you, a lot of the stats that I was able to identify and doing the research and the breakdown, they were eye popping. What was your question, Pro, about JK?
I was gonna ask you, well, what was his plus minus last year
It was a
or
plus one.
last
It
season?
was like around a plus 124. Yeah, right there, 124.
Okay, okay.
So he was a massive positive for someone that played as little minutes as he did. He was actually a very strong positive. So now I will say this, right? The biggest area I think he takes a step in is his just general production, shot creation. Uh, that was what he really filled in for us last year. Now I still think he's all around. He keeps mentioning he's an all-around player, and he takes pride in that. If you listen to him closely, he doesn't like boxing himself into anything, a label or like a category. JK doesn't like that. He views himself as a total package, as a player that can rebound, defend, play make, score. And obviously, he's better at some of those things than others, right? There's, scoring obviously is way ahead of his playmaking. And, defense is probably ahead of his rebounding. But, like, I still think there's a solid baseline he's shown in each of these categories. Even though I consider him a below average playmaker, I still think he's shown good flashes. Even though I think, as a shooter, he isn't, great yet, I think he's trending with positive indications. He can shoot well in the corner. He's a 40+% 3-point shooter in the corner. That's incredible. That's a great baseline. And then, working on the
And
above the
that's for
break.
his career. That's not like for one season. That's for his career.
Yes, his
That's
career.
since he's gotten into the league. That's impressive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you just look at the culmination of everything, and the rebounding, right? I think last year he showed to be a better rebounder, more aggressive, more connected, more locked in, putting a body on his man, all of that stuff. He's improved at, and then defensively too. I think coming into the league, he was probably an average or below average defender. And over the years, he's added more and more to his defensive game, and he's just improved in these areas. So I'm telling you guys, man, I don't just expect JK to improve in one area. I think he improves everywhere. But specifically, he will take the biggest jump as a scorer because last season, averaging 16 a night, I think his minutes are going to go up, his shots and his points are going to go up um, the most out of everything. But if we also need, as we've said before many times, his defense to improve. Now, his defense may not improve visually, like from a statistical standpoint, box score, but in terms of like the eye test on the court, watching him play, it absolutely can. It absolutely can improve. Like, we don't need to see him average 2 steals and, a block, like for him to be considered a better defender. What I need to see from him is connectivity on a string, not causing breakdowns, not biting on pump fakes, sticking to his man, taking good angles, his positioning fundamentally sound, all of that stuff. He needs to check off. And again, it'll take time. He's 21 years old. He's not going to be perfect for out the gate, but I still think he can improve noticeably because he's had the film work, he's had the experience, right? And he's played against a lot of matchups already. He's played against KD, Tatum, Devin Booker, John Morant, LeBron, Kawhi. Like, he's played next to some of the best players in the world. Now, obviously, he hasn't had, a ton of opportunity, but even in those limited reps, I still think he's shown a lot. He's shown a lot. And, some more successful than others, right? The quicker players, the more shifty players like a Booker or a Ja, less success against. But the stronger, more mid-range perimeter players like Tatum and KD, like, he does very well against those guys. Last season he completely shut them down.
Remember in that Phoenix game, towards the end, he was guarding KD.
Brandon, we spent like a good 5 to 10 minutes on his playmaking. Like, I think JK's playmaking will raise the ceiling of this team immensely because the shooting is one thing, but if he can, and that's an entire different dimension to his game, playmaking. Like, I think that's the most difficult area to improve in basketball. It's the because when defenses key in on you and they game plan for you, all of your tendencies, your weaknesses, your patterns, all of that, they're prepared. They know what you want to do. They know what you like to do. They know what you're strong at, what you're good at. So they're going to figure out ways to slow you down. And you have to have counters, court vision, You have to have the ability to read the floor, scan it effectively, and it's tough. It's not easy to do as a 21-year-old. Like, especially in the playoffs, look at Ant Edwards. He struggled against the Mavs for a reason. He looked lost out there as a playmaker. He couldn't hold up. So, as our secondary creator, right, JK, we're going to need him to take a step there. Even if it's 15, 20%, right? It doesn't have to be a 40, 50% jump, obviously. It's going to take time. But if it's like, 15%, I think that's huge because that'll probably make him around an average playmaker. I don't think he's a bad one. I just think there's definitely steps he needs to take. But ultimately, he will be a positive. There's no doubt about it.